I just want to give a word of encouragement and a challenge to the moms. This is a message, as with any of these types of messages, it is something for all of us. So, guys, don't check out on me. And if you're not a mom, don't check out on me. If you're, a teenager, don't be like, focus. Let's see what God has for you this morning in the application. And so we want to be looking at several verses there. I've given you the verses, and the lady that we want to look at this morning, the mom, is Salome. Salome is how it's pronounced. And she is the wife of Zebedee. The New Testament, and we'll read her story in a moment. Salome is the feminine name of Solomon. Maybe you knew that. In the Greek, it comes from the root word of shalom, meaning peace. But her husband is Zebedee, and we know a little bit about him. He was a very successful business owner. He owned his own fishing company. They had hired people, so it was a well advanced. His sons worked for him. We'll talk about extensively this morning. But Jesus gave him a nickname. And his nickname was Thunder. Zebedee was Thunder. And so moms, here is a mom whose name means peace, and Zebedee means thunder. Can you imagine what that relationship was like? What that home was like? Some of the moms here today, you are a wife of thunder. Strong personality maybe, and we'll see that played out even in James and John's life. They followed Dad. They wanted to call fire down from heaven on people because they weren't being nice to them. They refused people to cast out demons because they weren't able to. The kind of maybe, I'm not sure if it's quick temper, but that strong personality. I'm probably glad, I'm sure James and John are glad that Salome doesn't mean lightning, because then it would be thunder and lightning were their parents. Like, that would be a pretty intense home. But typically in a marriage, there's one who's really strong, and then there's one that's more, let's just think this through. Let's do, And so if they had thunder and lightning as their parents, that would be very interesting, I think. So we know that there was two sons, James and John. James is always mentioned with John. There's no time they're not mentioned together. And James is mentioned first, probably because he was the oldest. And so we're going to be looking at the mom and what she did with her boys. We know that James was the first disciple of Jesus to be martyred in Acts chapter 12. He was killed by the sword. And John, his younger brother, would be the last of the disciples to die. He would have been dipped in or had boiling oil poured over him, and he survived that, and then exiled to the island of Patmos, where he received the revelation of the book of Revelation. And so we could imagine the scars that he had on his body, and yet living and dying of natural causes. He wrote 5 books of the New Testament, as you know, and he took Mary, the mother of Jesus, into his care after Jesus died and rose again. And so, again, probably because they had some means to do that financially because of the business. But we know that Salome was not a passive woman. She was not a mother that just kind of let the chips fall where they may. She was a mother very intentional. She would have maybe pushed the boundaries of the typical Jewish woman, very involved probably in the business, very involved in her sons' life. She followed Jesus. She followed this rabbi around, which maybe for some thought was inappropriate, that she should be at home with her family. But her and many ladies followed Jesus during his earthly ministry. We see an example of her boldness. We see an example of her being intentional in this request that she makes to Jesus in Matthew chapter 20. You probably are familiar with the request, Matthew 20, verse 20. It's easy to remember, 20:20. Then the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus with her sons. She knelt respectively to ask a favor. Verse 21, "What is your request?" he asked. She replied, "In your kingdom, Please let my two sons sit in places of honor or next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. See a similar story in Mark chapter 10, which we won't look at this morning. But she goes to Jesus and she petitions on behalf of her sons for them to sit in a place of honor. She is not just satisfied with her sons being a follower of Jesus, she wants them in leadership. She wants them to sit in places of influence. She had great dreams for her sons. She had a desire for her family to do more than just get by. We see that with their fishing business. We see that with them being successful. We see this in the spiritual. And I'll show you another example in a moment. But she had a desire for her family to succeed. There's not any real mom, there's no healthy mom that desires pain for their children. Most moms desire the best for their children. They desire their children to be successful. They desire their children to have a good, happy life and to avoid danger and not experience harm in their life. That's kind of true for most moms. But here we see that she has a desire beyond that. It wasn't just enough to be a follower of Jesus. She's going to Jesus to ask that they sit in places of honor. She's petitioning Jesus. We would say she's praying to Jesus for her kids. And please notice she's not praying a general prayer. Lord, whatever you want to have happen with my family. No, she's very intentional. Moms, I want to encourage you to define the vision for your children. What is it that you want your children to experience? And be very specific. And be as specific as Salome was when she went to Jesus, says, I want my sons to sit in places of honor in your kingdom. I want the best for my sons. And she is doing something about it. She's following Jesus, we'll look at later, but she's coming to him to ask the specific question. We see her boldness in this. She doesn't care if people get offended, and the other disciples are going to hear about this, and they're going to be upset. And she doesn't care. She's fighting for her children. She's fighting for her family. She wants them to succeed. She wants them to be in that place of honor. And moms, I know you want the best for your kids. I'm not questioning that, but I'm questioning, do you know the vision for your kids? Specifically, what do you want your kids to accomplish? In 10 years from today, what would that look like for them to be successful, for them to have a good life? Define that. And then moms, I want to encourage you this morning to be intentional to help that come about. What do you need to do as the mother to equip and to train, to model for your children for them to experience that? And the beautiful thing about that, this concept here, it's not about just if you have, a 1-year-old at your house. Okay, I got 18 years, I got something. Whether you have, one kid that's a 1-year-old, or your kids are out of the house, or your kids have their own kids. This is still true for all moms. Mom, what do you want for your children 10 years from today, 5 years from today, and 1 year from today? And what are you doing specifically to help them, to teach them, to show them the example of it? She had this desire for her kids to be successful. And she did more than just, I want them to be successful, and then be preoccupied with social media and streaming services and her own hobbies and all. No, she took her kids and said, we're going to go see Jesus. Mom, what are we doing? We're going to go ask Jesus to put you in places of leadership. Oh, Mom, don't do that. You're going to embarrass me. I know, we're going. And she led them to Jesus, and when she gets to Jesus, she bows down to him. Some translations say she worships him. It's a heart there where she comes and she petitions Jesus. And she says, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, will you give places of honor and leadership for my boys? I'm fighting for my boys. I'm fighting for my family. And I'm asking you to do something specific for me. Jesus does not rebuke her for her request. So the request was an okay request. Maybe it even pleased the Lord. Here's a woman fighting for her family. And she's setting this example. Notice, though, in order for her to come to Jesus and ask for her sons to rule with him in the kingdom, she understands Jesus is going to have a kingdom. She understood who Jesus was to some degree. Now, granted, and I admit, she was thinking of politically. She was thinking that Jesus was going to rule and reign on planet Earth. They were going to defeat the Romans, and they would have a time of peace. That's what she was thinking. She didn't understand he was the true Messiah. Now, she had walked with him for years. She had seen miracles. She had heard the teachings. She knew he was special. But even though on an earthly mindset, she still came to him and said, would you let my sons rule with you? Moms, do you understand who Jesus is? Do you have an understanding of him? Have you grown in him? Have you come to him in that place of understanding of who he is in your personal life? Because if you don't understand who Jesus is, you will never be able to bring your children to him. If you haven't seen God move in your life, how would you expect him to move in the life of your children? You don't even know what to ask God for if you haven't seen God do it in your life. So moms, maybe you're here today, and before you go petition for your own kids, maybe you need to petition for yourself. Lord, will you come and minister to me? Will you help me in this area of my life? I see I struggle in this area. Will you come and help me in this area? Will you bring healing in this area? Will you bring maturity in this area of my life? I want my kids to experience this, but I am not a good example. Lord, do it in my life. And in that process, bring your family to the Lord and come before him and say, I'm asking that you would do something great for my family. Again, very specific. Now, before James and John meet Jesus on this encounter, they accepted an invitation to follow him. We don't know when she came and talked to him, to Jesus. Surely it wasn't the first year of ministry. Maybe it wasn't even the second year. Maybe the third year of ministry. But Jesus comes along the shoreline. We know the story, calls to them to follow, and they come and follow. They leave Zebedee in the boat. See you, Dad, I'm out of here. Which we see a great conviction of the dad here to say, yeah, you guys go follow Jesus. I got this. The dad wasn't like, no, you need to stay here and do the family business. He didn't do that. He released them and said, now you go. And they followed this example. Mom was training them up. Mom was training her boys to recognize Jesus. And when Jesus came along and invited, they said yes. And they began to follow Jesus in his 3-year ministry. And during that time frame, they did miracles. During that time frame, they saw teachings. Peter and James and John were 3 in the innermost circle of the disciples of Jesus. Those 3 were invited with Jesus to go see miracles that the other ones didn't see. Jairus' daughter, for instance, was healed. They got to go to Mount Transfiguration and see the glory of Jesus being transformed right before them. They got questions answered. They would go to Jesus. You read the Gospels. They go to Jesus, say, Jesus, what did you mean by this? And Jesus tells it to those 3. And some of those things he tells them, don't tell anybody else about it. You see, James and John not only came to Jesus with their mom and experienced this closeness, but they experienced a closeness with Jesus. And I would submit to you, it's because mom was right there. Mom had trained them up, and I'll show you in a minute how we know that, but mom trained them up in the things of the Lord, encouraged them on their personal journey to follow Jesus. And in fact, mom herself begins to follow Jesus and serves Jesus and spends her money to buy supplies. She's faithful in her personal life to Jesus. She's going to Jesus specifically for her children to experience places of leadership. Here's how we know that she trained them up. In John chapter 18 and verse 15, Jesus is arrested. And he's taken to the high priest. The disciples scatter. Some follow to see what's going on. John 18, verse 15. Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples, which we know is John. So John is writing John. He doesn't put his name in there, maybe because of humility or whatever. But we know this is John. It says, that other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so that he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. So they bring Jesus arrested. There's the mob, there's the crowd, there's anger, there's all this commotion and chaos. And they get to the courtyard of the high priest. Peter doesn't go in because he doesn't know him. John knows him and says, I'm going in. How would he know the high priest? There's a couple possibilities. One, because he was trained up in that. They were part of religious services. They were part of that community. They understood that. And maybe because of Zebedee's business. As a business owner in the community, maybe he knew him. Maybe they did business together. The point is that before mom brings the boys to Jesus and asks a specific request that my boys be in places of leadership, because I don't want them just to be average. I want them to grow. I want them to be excellent. And so I'm going to Jesus. Before that, they had followed Jesus for roughly 3 years, probably less, before this moment happened. Before that, they grew up knowing Jesus, or grew up in knowing the high priest, going to church. And when they become a disciple, they're not just one of the 12, they're part of the inner circle. Moms, I know you want your kids to be close to Jesus. You want them to be part of the inner circle. You don't want them just to be a casual person, a casual Christian, coming to church and going home and maybe this. No, you want your kids to serve the Lord and to press into the things of God. And we see this pattern in her life that she brought her kids up she took them to church. They knew the people. Jesus comes along. They follow. Mom encourages their journey with Jesus. She's like, I'm not okay with them just being one of the 12 or even part of the inner circle. I want them to have more. So she grabs them and says, let's go to Jesus. And she has a specific vision, a specific direction, and she has specific requests that she asks Jesus for her kids. And Jesus doesn't rebuke her for that request. Not only do they have a connection to the high priest and given special access, but they were part of that inner circle of Jesus. Moms, I know you want the best for your kids. What's the specific vision for your kids? How close do you want them to be with Jesus? Are you okay with them just kind of being part of the 12, just being a Christian, but not really living it out? Or do you want them to be a follower of Jesus that is involved? Do you want them part of the inner circle? That their life is committed to Christ and all that they do is gone through a filter of serving the Lord, honoring them. I would say they saw that example in their mom. I would say that it wasn't just by accident, but they saw that example in mom. They saw a mom who wasn't okay with just being average. They saw a mom who wasn't okay with just showing up to church and then going home and doing nothing. No, they had a mom that was willing to invest herself into ministries. They saw a mom who was faithful in serving the Lord through their childhood. Maybe that's how they knew the high priest. That's how they had connection, because they were involved as a mom and even their father. She understood that Jesus was going to be a king. He was going to rule and reign. She had that personal connection with the Lord, and she wanted that for her kids. Here's some examples that we know of Salome. We know that she followed Jesus, and we know that she served him. We see her at the crucifixion in Mark chapter 15. In Mark 15, verse 40, we read, some women were there watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph. So this isn't Salome. And then we have Salome. So she's at the crucifixion. In order for her to know that Jesus was arrested, she had to be nearby. And she didn't get a phone call, like, get down here now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Traffic's bad. Like, she had to be nearby. She hears the commotion. She knows what's going on, and she was willing to sacrifice herself. She was a woman of courage to be in the midst of this mob. Those who are being arrested, other followers of Jesus, are running scared, but she is there, and they're watching from a distance. They're nearby. Verse 41, they had been followers of Jesus and had cared for him while he was in Galilee. She's a follower, and she cared for Jesus. She was a follower, and she served the Lord. She followed Jesus. Moms, are you following Jesus? Are you following his teachings? Are you following his instructions? His instructions on how to raise your children. Following his instructions on what the expectations are. Following his instructions on your own personal life. Are you following Jesus? And more than that, are you serving Jesus? Are you serving him with your life, with your skills, with your giftings we've been looking at this year? Are you serving him with your finances? Are you serving him with your time and your ability? Are you serving Jesus? Because you see, that's the example your kids will see. Your kids are going to see that example. And 20 years from today, they're going to say, I serve the Lord because I saw my mom serving the Lord. I'm a follower of Jesus because I saw my mom following Jesus. She gave for me the example. And as a result, I was able to have special privileges. I was part of the inner circle of Jesus. I was known by the high priest. I was able to get in close with Jesus. In fact, my mom had the nerve to ask Jesus to give me a position of authority. And he did because of my mom. My mom prayed for me. My mom lived it in front of me. My mom showed me what it looked like. And the followers of Jesus, they cared for him while he was in Galilee. Many other women who had come with him to Jerusalem were also there. We read a similar thing in Matthew 27, verse 56. It says, here's this example for us. Courage to be at the crucifixion. Followed him to the cross. Moms, have you gone to the cross for salvation? Have you gone to the cross for salvation? Have you gone to the place where your sins are forgiven and your old flesh is crucified with Christ? Have you gone there? That's the place we need to go, as all of us. We all need to go to the cross to have our sins forgiven. There's only one way to heaven, that's through Jesus Christ and him alone. But she followed him to the cross. We also see her showing up at the empty tomb. In Mark chapter 16, in verse 1, Mark 16, verse 1, we read, Saturday evening, when the Sabbath ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. So Jesus was crucified, and his body was put in the tomb because the Sabbath was coming, and so we needed to and we'll finish this up after the Sabbath. And they go out and they spend their money to buy spices to bury the body. See, she still loved Jesus. She was still serving Jesus, even though her hopes and dreams, listen, of her children not getting a place of honor because the one that she thought was going to bring it is now dead. When there was no hope, she still served the Lord. And moms, I know there's days that it feels like there is no hope. I know there's days it feels like everything is falling apart and there's no strength and there's no encouragement and there's no anything. And I'm asking you this morning, will you serve the Lord when it seems like all hope is gone? That's what she did. She went out and invested her time. She went out and invested her money. They bought these spices. And then we read verse 2, very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. You see, it's in the following of Jesus, moms, that you get the strength to continue. You can't serve if you're not following, but you can follow and not serve. You can follow Jesus and like, oh, this is so good, and you can read your Bible and you can be fed and filled, but never go serve. But I promise you are not going to be able to serve unless you're following. Because otherwise, you're serving out of your own strength, your own energy, your own wisdom. You're not going to be able to serve your family, serve your kids in your own strength. It's not going to last. You just can't do that. So you got to first follow Jesus. And it's in that following of Jesus that you are given the strength to fulfill your God-given responsibilities. It's in the following of Jesus that you receive the encouragement to continue on. It's in the following of Jesus that you receive the knowledge and the revelation that you need in order to speak to and teach your children. It's in the following of Jesus. Moms, follow Jesus. Be intentional as a mom to follow Jesus in your personal life, to get to know his voice and to know his heart, to know his teaching, to know his character, to know his attributes. And again, this is for all of us. We all need to be following Jesus, preparing for what lies ahead. We don't know what lies ahead, but God does. And then it's from that strength and that energy that we get from following Jesus, from that relationship, that now we can serve him. And we serve him with joy. She walked with Jesus around Galilee in the hot, humid days and the dusty and just the chaos and all these people always coming to Jesus, and all they do is they want something from him. And the bickering of the disciples, and there's mom, right, walking with James, and like, Mom, can you stay back? It's kind of embarrassing. You're always with us, like, you know. I want to be with the guys, Mom. Let's leave me alone. But there she is with the other ladies, and we need to prepare a meal. And so they're preparing the meal while Jesus is sitting down doing the teaching with the disciples. And people from the community coming out to be healed. And she's seeing this, and she's serving the Lord. She could be at home in her comfortable bed with thunder, right? Enjoying the comforts of their home. They had a nice home. They had money. But no, she's out serving. She's serving. And she's serving day in and day out. She's following, and she's hearing truths, and she's being encouraged, and she's being strengthened. Her faith is growing, and it's from that relationship of love for Jesus that she says, I'm going to serve him. I'm going to give it all to him. Moms, I know you're serving, and you're doing a phenomenal job serving your family. You're making sacrifices that your family don't understand. You're serving your kids. They don't appreciate it. You're doing good, but may I encourage you to follow Jesus more closely, to be strengthened of him, to be encouraged by him. Allow him to flow through you. Understand exactly what it is that God wants you to do, so you're serving in the right way of honoring him. That's what she did. And when all hope was gone, when Jesus' body is in the tomb, and her thought of her sons ever sitting in a place of honor is destroyed, our leader's gone. What does she do? She serves him. She serves him. It would have been easy for her to say, I don't have time. All my hope is gone. She served him. But she modeled for her kids. She trained them up in the things of the Lord. There's another example. We won't spend a lot of time on it. I just want to give you the verse. It's on your handout, 2 Timothy 1:5. We have Eunice, who's the mother, and Lois, who's the grandmother of Timothy. This mom and grandmother duo taught Timothy the scriptures. They taught him the word of God. And so they're teaching at a young age, and then Timothy comes to the age, and he meets Paul, and then eventually Timothy becomes a pastor, and he's pastoring partly because his mom, and her grandmother, for sure, as we have written in Scripture, teaches him these things. This next one I really like. After the empty tomb, they have this encounter with the angels. They realize Jesus is not there. His body's gone. They've been told that Jesus is going to come again. Let's read this, Mark 16, verse 7. This is the angels to these women at the empty tomb. Now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, which I think it specifically mentions Peter was because Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and he wants to encourage Peter to be restored. But it's also because mom of James and John is there and saying, don't just go tell your boys, tell everybody, and especially Peter, to restore him, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you before he died. So what were they told to go tell the disciples? They were told to tell the disciples that Jesus was going to be in Galilee. This is so cool. It is from her experience at the empty tomb that mom was able to tell her boys where to find Jesus. It is from her experience at the empty tomb that she was able to tell her family where to find Jesus. Moms, do you know where to find Jesus? Do you know where to tell your kids where to find Jesus when life is difficult? Do you know where to tell them to find Jesus when they're at school and all the pressure of the world is coming against them? Do they know where to find Jesus when they feel all alone, when they feel depressed, discouraged, and overwhelmed? Do they know where to find Jesus when they feel like giving up? Do you know where to find Jesus? You see, it's because she went to the empty tomb, because she went there to serve Jesus in the midst of having no hope. It's all over. She's there to serve Jesus. And while she's there, she sees the greatest miracle of the empty tomb. And then she is given information to go tell the disciples that Jesus is going to meet them in Galilee. Had she not gone to the empty tomb, had she not gone to serve Jesus when there was no hope, she would not have been able to tell her sons where to find Jesus. If her sons came to her and said, hey, Mom, I'm hearing this rumor that Jesus is supposed to be in Galilee. Do you know anything about it? She'd be like, no, I don't know anything about it. Because she didn't go to the empty tomb. But because she did go to the tomb, she gets to go tell, hey, boys, guess what? Jesus is alive from the dead. What are you talking about, Mom? No, I'm telling you, because I experienced it. I was there. I saw it. And he said he's going to meet us in Galilee. Let's go to Galilee. Moms, I want to encourage you to follow Jesus. Serve Jesus when there's no hope. And when it feels like there's no hope, look for those directions from the Lord where he's telling you what to do, where to go, where to take your kids. Here's where you find Jesus. Here's how you find strength in the midst of the difficulties. When you feel like the world's coming against you and your kids are being attacked every single minute of every single day like never before in our culture, all they have to do is open up their phone, and there's all the temptations and all the lies, and the enemy is right there in their hand. It's not the TV set with 3 channels anymore that you can just turn off those 3 channels. It's not just protecting them while they're in the school, because everything just flows through these phones. Your kids are being inundated. Do they know where to find Jesus? Moms, it's partly your responsibility to teach them and to show them. And it comes from your experience with it. It's from you. You can't tell Jesus you can't tell people where Jesus is at if you're not with Jesus to know where he's going to be. Have those encounters with him. I encourage you to keep following Jesus. I want to encourage you to serve Jesus. I want to encourage you to petition specifically for your kids on specific things, whatever that might be in your situation. You know, James and John are going to be faithful in following Jesus, as I mentioned. The torture and the persecution that they went through, but they were faithful because, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because mom was faithful in her walk with the Lord. By the way, the boys do get to sit in a place of honor. Matthew chapter 19, verse 28. Jesus replied, I assure you that when the world is made new and the Son of Man sits upon his glorious throne, you who have been my followers will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So they do get that place of honor because they were willing to follow Jesus. So on this Mother's Day, moms, I want to encourage you, don't just drive your kids around town, taking them to school and this activity and picking them up from work. Don't just drive your kids around, taking them to different events. Take them to Jesus. Take them to Jesus. Salome took her boys to Jesus for a specific request. But in order to do that, you need to be following Jesus yourself. You need to have those encounters at the empty tomb. You need to have those encounters at the cross. You need to have those encounters one-on-one with Jesus. And it's in that following of Jesus that you find the strength and the encouragement and the discernment on how to serve Jesus. And it's in your following and your serving of Jesus, you're setting the example and the modeling it out for your kids. You're positioning them in a place of success where they too will be like James and John, be faithful to the very end. They will not waver in the faith. They will not compromise. But they will be with Jesus. Even in persecution, even if it costs you your life, as it did for James, and you could argue even with John. But they were faithful. Moms, I know you want your kids to experience great things in life. But the most important thing would be for them to be faithful in the things of God. Wouldn't that be the greatest reward? 20 years from today, 50 years from today, 5 billion years from today, your kids are in heaven with the Lord, ruling and reigning. You can still annoy him in heaven. That'll be okay. You get a mom's pass to do that. But the joy that you will have. Moms, be encouraged today. Be encouraged to follow Jesus. Be encouraged to serve him. In that process, be specific about the vision for your kids. Will you stand with me this morning? We want to close by praying for the moms and I would ask for the moms to come to the front, and I know we do this different each year. I know some moms just roll their eyes at me like, are you serious? Yes, because I'm your pastor and I get to do this once a year. So, moms, if you would mind coming to the front and turning and facing the audience, we just want to pray over you. You're special. Come up here, face the audience. We'll turn off the live stream.